The San Antonio Spurs are the NBA's next dynasty. Just when we thought the Spurs would finally go by the wayside, the franchise is back on the path to becoming one of the best teams in basketball. The Spurs had a dominant reign from 1999 till 2017, winning 1,077 games and losing just 433, which is a winning percentage of 71.3%. Of those 19 seasons, they will make the conference finals 10 times, going all the way to the finals 6 times, and winning 5 championships in those 6 trips. Their dominance would finally subside for a couple years amongst the Kawhi Leonard drama and a short-lived rebuild. The Spurs, as we know, would win the draft lottery this summer, giving them the opportunity to draft Victor Wembenyama. What hasn't been discussed enough was all of the other blue chip prospects that the Spurs have collected over the last couple of seasons in addition to Victor Wembenyama. With a lot of the league's best talent, particularly in the West, playing on the back half of their playing careers, there's a good chance that this team's core will peak right at the perfect time. With Greg Popovich just recently extending his contract with the Spurs for another 5 years, Pop surely knows that the future is very bright for this franchise and he wants to be a part of it. Let's talk about why the future is just so bright for the San Antonio Spurs. It wouldn't be right if we didn't start with Victor Wembenyama. The 7'5", 19-year-old kid out of France might be the most hyped up draft pick we've seen since the likes of LeBron James back in 2003, and after watching a few Summer League games from him, it's easy to understand why. In the French league that Wemby was playing overseas, he was a 5 who really did it all on the floor, on both ends, offense and defense, as we all have seen some of the ridiculous highlights he had. This type of play is not going to translate, at least not right away in his NBA career. Wembenyama clearly has a ton of potential on offense, but even just seeing in those 2 Summer League games, he struggles at times to get to his spots and fight for position because of his light frame, and the ball handling just doesn't seem to translate as cleanly. It seems a little gimmicky for a guy of his size, but as he gets used to the NBA pace and physicality, I'm sure he will have a much easier time. It's also worth noting that Wembenyama was still playing for his team overseas in the playoffs just days before the draft, so I think it's safe to say that he could use some rest, which is why he got shut down in Summer League just after 2 games. What will translate though to the NBA floor right away is his abilities on defense. Being 7'5" puts him at a genetic predispositions that a majority of players just don't have access to, but accompanying his physical gifts is the IQ he has on that end too. He does a tremendous job of staying in front of players on the perimeter and deterring anyone who gets into the paint. In just 54 minutes of Summer League play, he recorded 8 blocks. Depending on how quickly he gets adjusted to NBA play, I think there's a chance he could be up for all defense consideration. Wembenyama's addition will be crucial for San Antonio right away. The Spurs had the worst defensive rating out of any team last season at 120. Even if Victor struggles on offense throughout the entire season, his instant impact on defense will make the Spurs that much more competitive. The next player we need to talk about is Jeremy Sohan. Sohan is one of the NBA's most intriguing prospects. Coming off a really solid rookie year, the former 9th overall pick averaged 11 points, 5 rebounds, and about 2.5 assists in just 26 minutes per game. His role has changed quite a bit over the course of the regular season, but I think he slots in best as a point forward type, as he's shown flashes this season of being a secondary playmaker for the Spurs. Sohan is a gifted athlete with a ton of potential on the defensive end. Being 6'9" with a 7-foot wingspan certainly helps in that department. He will have to continue to work on keeping the fouls under control, as I imagine he will see a minutes uptick next season. Sohan can be a bruising, Swiss Army knife type of 4-man for the Spurs moving forward, who does just a little bit of everything on both ends of the floor, while bringing all the energy too. In theory, Sohan can be the perfect frontcourt mate to play alongside Victor Wembenyama. The third player that we have to talk about is Devin Vassell. Vassell just wrapped up his 3rd season in the NBA, as he has continued to improve year over year. Devin was the 11th pick in the 2020 draft, coming out of Florida State. Vassell played on a really talented FSU squad, so it's hard to see what his true skill set was like in college as far as translating to the NBA, but he showed to be a great shooter and athlete for the Seminoles. After a couple of playing seasons in the NBA, Vassell is starting to turn himself into a 3-level scorer. His season was up and down this past year, dealing with a knee injury and then some soreness after the fact, holding him to just 38 games played. In 18 of those 38 games, he scored 20 or more points. In his rookie and sophomore year, for comparison, he combined for 7 games with 20 points or more scored. Vassell is a 6'5" guard wing combo with a 6'10" wingspan, which is today's prototypical player. A guy who could do it all on the offensive end, on or off the ball, while also having the physical tools to possibly become a good defender as well. Vassell is another guy who slots in really nice alongside Sohan and Victor. The last player we need to talk about of this core 4 is Kelvin Johnson. Kelvin Johnson, at the ripe age of 24, is the longest tenured Spur on the roster at the moment, coming off of his 4th season, featuring the highest scoring output of his career so far. With a high scoring output and a bigger role, some of his strengths from the 2022 season took a bit of a hit. Kelvin wasn't as engaged or effective on the defensive end, and his 3-point efficiency took a nosedive, dropping from 39.8% to 32.9%. From what I've read, there seems to be some level of malcontent with Kelvin's season amongst the Spurs fan base because of his drop in efficiency and defensive energy. But let me defend Kelvin Johnson for you. With the addition of Wembenyama, the development of Sohan as a playmaker, and a healthy season from Vassell, Johnson will have a bounce back year as a shooter and a defender. Kelvin was basically the #1 guy for the Spurs all season long, which is not for everybody. I see it as a positive that he had this opportunity to be the #1 guy, as it allowed him to develop his lead skills, which will come in handy at times when he's the 2nd or 3rd option on the floor come next season. Johnson was extended ahead of the 23 season as he agreed to a 4-year, $74 million deal, which will be descending throughout the duration of the contract, which I think is great for San Antonio's cap space moving forward. Vassell's contract extension talk should be looming sometime this season if he doesn't hit restricted free agency, but if he does hit restricted free agency, I would imagine he would get somewhere in the ballpark of $20 to $25 million a year. I think the Spurs will offer a contract around that amount at some point this regular season. The Spurs also have Trey Jones, who they just re-signed to a 2-year, $20 million deal, the younger brother of Tyus Jones, who actually has a pretty similar skill set, as he's also a really solid playmaker. I'm not really sure if Trey Jones is the long-term answer at point guard for the Spurs, as he's still trying to find his footing as a shooter. He's shooting below 30% from 3 on very low volume, which is not a good sign for someone who wants to be a lead guard. Malachi Branham has shown to be a microwave scorer as he burst onto the scene for the Spurs in the back half of the regular season, with 9 20-point games from January 1st till the end of the year. Julian Champagnie has also been one of this summer league's best performers, so I imagine he will be in contention for rotation minutes next season. Not only do the Spurs have all this talent on their roster already, but they have 14 first-round picks over the next 7 years, including the 7 of their own first-round picks. They also have approximately $48 million coming off of the books after this upcoming season across 6 different expiring contracts. These contracts can be used as trade chips at the deadline, or it will give the Spurs the chance to be big players in the summer next offseason. The only thing this team is missing right now is experience for the young guys and a true floor general to get this team's offense together. This team has a ton of talent, it's undeniable, but I think it can be a little chaotic at times, as we saw over the course of their last season. I'm sure they will find their guy over the next couple years to fill that role. San Antonio's rise from the ashes is inevitable at this point, as we know it's not a matter of if, but when this team will be ready for contention. Spurs fans, y'all have a lot to be excited about.